Story 1. The Keeper of the Storm. The storm descended on Willow Creek Cemetery with biblical fury, its torrents carving rivers through the muddy earth. It was early March 2025, and the air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked moss and the electric hum of something ancient stirring. My name is Jeremy Caldwell, a 34-year-old cemetery operations coordinator, a title that masked the weight of my duties. By day, I managed plot sales, consoled grieving families, and navigated the endless bureaucracy of death. By night, I was the cemetery's reluctant guardian, bound to its secrets by a decade of service. On nights like this, Willow Creek felt less like a resting place and more like a living entity, its shadows whispering truths no one dared to hear. The story began with Antonio Morales, a man whose presence seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 prayers. In his late 30s, with dark eyes that held both sorrow and unshakable faith, he sat across from me in the cemetery's cramped office, its walls lined with faded maps of burial plots. Antonio's thick Hispanic accent wove through his words as he spoke of his father, Miguel, a man clinging to life in a hospice bed. Miguel's photos, lovingly preserved in a worn leather wallet, revealed a face etched with kindness. A carpenter who'd built homes for his community, now too young to face death at 62. Antonio's spirituality was a quiet force, his reverence for life and death palpable as he chose a plot beneath an ancient oak, a place he called God's Embrace. I promised to honor Miguel's memory with a seamless process, sealing our pact with a handshake that felt like a vow. Days later, Miguel passed, his death a quiet ripple in the storm's prelude. The funeral was set for a Thursday, under a sky that wept as fiercely as the mourners. Thunder rolled like a celestial dirge as the hearse led a somber procession through the cemetery's iron gates, its black frame gleaming in the rain. I stood under the office awning, my coat soaked through, watching Antonio in the car behind the hearse. His face was a mask of grief, but he managed a wave, a fleeting connection amidst the chaos. The storm's ferocity drove me back inside, where I monitored the service through grainy CCTV feeds, the screens flickering with each lightning strike. As the mourners gathered at the gravesite, I joined them, driving a battered cemetery pickup truck through the deluge. Under a black umbrella, I supervised the burial, ensuring every detail, from the placement of the casket to the priest's final blessing, honored Miguel's legacy. The wind howled, nearly drowning the priest's words, but Antonio's steady gaze held the ceremony together. When it ended, the mourners dispersed, their headlights fading into the rain. I lingered, the oak's branches swaying above Miguel's fresh grave, a silent sentinel in the storm. My duties didn't end there. Willow Creek was vast, its 50 acres of tombstones stretching into the gloom like an army of stone ghosts. I made rounds in the truck, the rain a relentless companion, checking for stragglers or signs of vandalism, a growing issue since vandals had defaced a mausoleum the previous year. Back at the office, a mountain of paperwork awaited, forms to finalize Miguel's burial and others to prepare for the next day's services. The cemetery locked its gates at 5:30 p.m., and with the storm darkening the sky to an unnatural twilight, I hurried to finish. After securing the front gate, I drove one final lap, the truck's headlights slicing through the downpour. That's when I saw him, a figure moving swiftly down a lane of tombstones, his silhouette flickering in the storm's haze. He wore a long coat, his movements unnaturally fluid, as if gliding rather than running. He darted behind a hedge, vanishing into the shadows. My heart kicked into overdrive. I honked the horn, expecting a response, perhaps a lost mourner or a reckless teenager, but only silence answered. Grabbing my umbrella, I plunged into the rain, my boots sinking into the sodden earth. I rounded the hedge, scanning the long row of graves flanked by dripping foliage. Nothing. No footprints, no trace of the stranger. The storm battered me as I searched for nearly an hour, my flashlight beam dancing across graves, but the figure was gone. Back at the office, I scoured the CCTV footage, my eyes burning from the strain. The cameras, hampered by the storm, showed no sign of movement, only static and shadows. I tried to focus on my paperwork, but unease coiled in my gut, a primal warning I couldn't shake. Then a sound shattered the silence. The visitation room's front door slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. I sprang from my chair, calling out, "Who's there?" My voice echoed in the empty lobby. I checked every corner, every window, the door's lock undisturbed. The wind, I told myself, though doubt gnawed at me like a hungry beast. As I returned to my desk, a flicker outside caught my eye. Through the rain-streaked window, a man stood, his face pale and expressionless, staring directly at me. My breath caught as recognition hit. He was the spitting image of Miguel Morales, his features unmistakable even in the dim light. His eyes, unblinking, seemed to pierce my soul, carrying a weight of sorrow and something darker. Accusation, perhaps. I stumbled back, a scream tearing from my throat. He didn't move, didn't flinch. Heart racing, I approached the window, but he was gone, as if the storm had reclaimed him. I bolted outside, the rain pelting my face as I searched the grounds, my flashlight sweeping wildly. No footprints, no sign he'd ever been there. The oak loomed in the distance, its branches clawing at the sky. Soaked and trembling, I locked up, drove home, and said nothing to my wife, claiming exhaustion. But sleep was a stranger that night. The next day, I reviewed the CCTV again, finding a fleeting anomaly, a shadow where Miguel had stood, there and gone in a blink. I began avoiding that part of the cemetery, but the whispers didn't stop. Colleagues reported strange sightings near the oak, a figure in the rain, a voice in the wind. I never told Antonio, but I learned Miguel had been a man of deep faith, rumored to have blessed the land he worked. Had his spirit stayed to guard it? Months later, I found a small wooden cross near the oak, unmarked but warm to the touch. I left it there, a silent offering to the keeper of the storm. Story 2. The laughing shadows, October's chill, wrapped Black Hollow in a shroud of frost, the wind whistling through the skeletal remains of ancient oaks. My name is Jeremy Tate, a 20-year-old rebel with a passion for heavy metal and a disdain for the suffocating monotony of my hometown. Black Hollow was a relic, its 18th century buildings sagging under the weight of poverty and forgotten dreams. The town's history was a tapestry of tragedy, witch trials, plagues, and whispered tales of restless spirits. My friend Lucas and I, bound by our band and a shared hunger for chaos, were its restless sons. One night at 3 a.m., we sought to outrun boredom with a dangerous game. We'd been cruising the deserted streets, our car's speakers blasting riffs that shook the windows. Lucas, with his mop of black hair and mischievous grin, was the spark to my fuse. But the thrill of music faded, and the town's empty roads mocked our restlessness. Over a shared cigarette, Lucas proposed we explore Black Hollow's massive cemetery, a necropolis split by a highway, its older section a forbidden realm behind an iron gate. The idea was reckless, intoxicating, a middle finger to the town's oppressive silence. We parked near the Old Town Square, the gate looming like a challenge to our courage. Slipping through the gate, we entered a world frozen in time. The air was thick with the scent of moss and decay, the tombstones worn smooth by centuries of neglect. Our flashlights danced across faded epitaphs, revealing names and dates from the 1700s. Soldiers, mothers, children lost to time. We wandered, snapping photos and laughing at our own daring, though a part of me felt the weight of our intrusion. These were sacred grounds and we were invaders, our footsteps an affront to the dead. An hour in, we slumped against a gnarled pecan tree, its branches clawing at the moonless sky. The night was silent, save for the rustle of leaves in the wind. Then a sound pierced the stillness, a child's laughter, high and clear, impossibly close. My first thought was a toy, some motion-activated trinket left on a grave. Lucas grinned, calling it creepy as hell, but cool. We laughed it off, our bravado a shield against the unknown. But the air grew heavy, the darkness pressing against us like a living thing. The laughter came again, closer, followed by the crunch of leaves under unseen feet. My heart kicked into overdrive, the sense of being watched, a cold blade at my neck. Lucas's smile faded, his gaze fixed on a wooded patch nearby. "Someone's out there," he whispered, pointing to a flicker of movement in the shadows. We stood ready to bolt, when the laughter rang out a third time. Now a chorus of voices, childlike but wrong, echoing from all directions. Panic seized us. We ran, our boots pounding the earth, the laughter chasing us like a pack of spectral hounds. My lungs burned as we tore down the hill, the old cemetery's gate a distant promise of safety. The laughter seemed to weave through the trees, now joined by whispers, faint, unintelligible, but laced with malice. We reached my car, parked haphazardly by the highway. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking as I started the engine and peeled out, the tires screeching. Lucas was silent, his face pale in the dashboard's glow, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror, as if expecting pursuit. We didn't stop until we reached the gas station, its fluorescent lights a beacon in the desolate night. There, we checked the car, paranoia whispering of sabotage. The back door was ajar, a detail that sent ice through my veins. I knew we hadn't touched it. We searched the back seat, found nothing, and sped away. But the laughter lingered, a haunting echo in my mind. At home, I couldn't sleep, the memory of those voices clawing at me. Days later, driven by a need to understand, I returned to the cemetery in daylight. Near the pecan tree, I found a small, weathered doll, its eyes stitched shut, its fabric stained with something dark. It wasn't there that night, I was certain. I left it untouched, my skin crawling. Researching Black Hollow's history, I uncovered tales of a 19th century orphanage fire near the cemetery, its child victims buried in unmarked graves. Locals whispered of laughter heard at night, of shadows that moved without source. Lucas and I never returned, but the doll appeared in my dreams, its stitched eyes opening to reveal a void. The cemetery had claimed a piece of us, and the laughing shadows were never far behind. Story 3. The Sigil's Eternal Curse. The summer of 2023 was a fever dream of restless nights and reckless decisions. My name is Ethan Harper, a 19-year-old with a chip on his shoulder and a hunger for adventure. My friend Sean was my partner in crime, a lanky goofball with a perpetual Coke bottle and a knack for ideas that skirted the edge of sanity. One evening, sprawled in my parents' basement with a half-eaten Wendy's burger, Sean suggested we explore the creepy cemetery across town. It was a random, absurd idea, but with no school the next day and a restless itch in my bones, I agreed. The cemetery, known as St. Agnes's Plot, was no ordinary graveyard. Tucked behind a Gothic iron fence, it was a small, forgotten patch of maybe 100 tombstones, their inscriptions eroded by centuries of wind and rain. Dense woods flanked two sides, an abandoned textile mill loomed on another, and a quiet road ran alongside. The place radiated unease, its archaic stones untouched by visitors for decades. Locals avoided it, whispering of strange lights and voices heard after dark. The sky that evening was a bruised red, casting an ominous glow that seemed to pulse with warning. Sean parked his Honda down the road, out of sight from any passing cars. We cut through the woods, hopping the low fence with ease. The cemetery was silent, the air thick with the scent of pine and decay. We wandered, reading 19th century epitaphs, our laughter masking the growing tension. The tombstones told stories of a town ravaged by disease and war, their faded words a testament to lives cut short. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a constant pressure at the back of my neck, as if the graves themselves were judging us. I glanced at the mill, its windows dark and smudged with grime. For a moment I saw a figure at one of the panes, its outline blurred but unmistakably human. I told Sean, my voice low, the alcohol in my system dulling my fear. He, ever the thrill-seeker, wanted to investigate, his eyes gleaming with reckless curiosity. I stayed by a tombstone, my unease mounting, as he circled the building, his flashlight beam slicing through the dusk. Then a crack split the air, like a branch snapping underfoot, and I turned to see an older man, gray hair, black raincoat, a mustache framing a furious scowl. He screamed, "Get out!" with a voice that shook the earth, its timbre carrying an unnatural weight, as if drawn from the depths of the grave. The world tilted, my vision swimming as darkness swallowed me. I woke to Sean dragging me through the woods, his face a mask of terror, his breath ragged. "Run!" he shouted, and I obeyed, my legs pumping as something pursued us. Footsteps, heavy and relentless, crunching through the underbrush. The air was thick with the scent of rot, and a low guttural hum seemed to rise from the earth itself. We scrambled over the fence, my heart pounding as we reached the car. Sean floored it, the engine roaring as we fled, the mill's silhouette shrinking in the rearview mirror. Later, at a diner miles away, Sean revealed what he'd found in the mill. A sigil of Baphomet painted on the warped wooden floor, its lines glowing faintly in the dark. Surrounding it were eyeless dolls, their button eyes staring blankly, arranged in a circle as if in ritual. He'd heard the man scream and found me unconscious, the stranger advancing with deliberate steps. Sean had carried me to safety, but the memory of that night wasn't the end. Weeks later, I began having nightmares, flashes of the man's face, the sigil pulsing red, the dolls turning their heads to watch me. Objects in my room moved inexplicably, a book falling, a door creaking open. A faint whisper like the man's scream woke me at night, always at 3 a.m. Driven by dread, I researched St. Agnes's plot, uncovering a chilling history. The mill had been a site of occult activity in the 1920s, its workers rumored to have practiced dark rituals. A fire had gutted it, killing several, their bodies buried in the cemetery. Locals claimed the mill was cursed, its sigil a gateway to something unholy. I returned once in daylight, finding the mill boarded up, but the air felt wrong, heavy with malice. At the cemetery, I found a doll like the ones Sean described, half buried near a grave. I burned it, but the nightmares persisted, the sigil's curse a chain I couldn't break. Sean moved away, unable to face the town. I stayed, but Black Hollow's shadows grew longer, and the mill's hum never left my ears. Story 4. The Phantom's Eternal Call. The rain fell in a mournful cadence, turning Oakwood Cemetery into a tapestry of grief and memory. It was July 2025, my grandfather's birthday, and I'd driven an hour from my apartment to honor the man who'd been my rock. My name is Sarah Ellison, a 27-year-old graphic designer with a penchant for nostalgia and a heart still tethered to my grandfather, Henry. His stories of fishing trips, wartime courage, and quiet evenings on his porch had shaped me. His grave, shared with my grandmother in a sprawling cemetery of rolling hills and ancient oaks, was a place of pilgrimage, a way to keep his light alive. Oakwood was a labyrinth of stone and sorrow, its 50 acres dotted with memorials that whispered of lives long gone. The rain kept mourners away, leaving me alone with the silence, the sky a bruised gray that seemed to weep for my loss. The gatekeeper, a grizzled man with kind eyes and a limp, took the plot number and waved me through, his voice muffled by the storm. I navigated the winding paths, my memory of past visits hazy. I'd always come with family, never as the driver. The solitude was oppressive, the rain a constant drumbeat against my windshield. When I found Henry's stone, I parked on the grass, my heart heavy with the weight of absence. The granite was weathered but proud, etched with his name and dates, Henry Ellison, 1938 to 2020. I laid a bouquet of lilies at the base, their petals trembling in the rain, a symbol of the love that endured. Closing my eyes, I prayed, letting memories of Henry's voice wash over me, his laughter, his gentle teasing, the way he'd call me Sprout, even when I was grown. The prayer was a bridge to him, a moment of connection that felt as real as his embrace. When I opened my eyes, a man stood 5 rows away staring at me. His face was Henry's, same weathered lines, same kind eyes, same silver hair slicked back by the rain. My breath caught, my mind reeling. He wore the plaid shirt I'd seen him in countless times, now faded and soaked. I blinked and he was gone, leaving only the rain and my racing pulse. My hands trembled as I whispered, "Love you, Grandpa," and stumbled back to my car, a headache pulsing behind my eyes, sharp and insistent. On Prospect Road, a quiet stretch flanked by dense forest, I saw him again, a figure on the roadside, unmistakable in his plaid shirt, his posture as familiar as my own reflection. My heart plummeted and I swerved, tires screeching as I fought to stop. The car skidded, halting in the middle of the road. When I looked back, a deer stood where Henry had been, its eyes glinting in my headlights, unperturbed by the chaos. I drove home, my mind a storm of doubt and fear, the headache now a throbbing weight that blurred my vision. That night my phone rang at 2 a.m., an unknown number flashing on the screen. Static crackled when I answered, a harsh, grating sound that set my nerves on edge. Then for a fleeting moment, I heard Henry's voice, faint and distant, saying, "Sprout, I'm here." The call cut to silence, leaving me trembling, every part of my body shaking as if plunged into ice. I tried calling back, but the number was invalid. The next day, my provider couldn't trace it, claiming insufficient data, a flimsy excuse that deepened my unease. The terror didn't end there. Over the weeks, I felt Henry's presence, faint whispers in the dark, a shadow in my peripheral vision, the scent of his pipe tobacco lingering in my apartment. My dreams were haunted by his face, his eyes pleading for something I couldn't grasp. I returned to Oakwood, laying fresh lilies, but the air felt charged, as if the cemetery itself was alive with his spirit. I began researching, finding stories of Oakwood's history, a site of spiritual significance, its land once sacred to indigenous tribes, later a burial ground for settlers. Locals spoke of apparitions, of voices carried on the wind. The sightings continued. At work, I'd see Henry's silhouette in reflections, hear his voice in crowded rooms. Friends noticed my distraction, my pallor, urging me to see a doctor, but no test explained the headaches or the weight in my chest. I confided in my mother, who revealed Henry had believed in an afterlife, claiming he'd watch over us. The thought was comforting, yet terrifying. Why was he so present, so insistent? One night, my phone rang again, the same unknown number. This time, Henry's voice was clearer, saying, "Sprout, don't forget me." I wept, unable to answer before the call ended. I don't know if it was him, but the question haunts me. I visit Oakwood monthly now, each trip a mix of dread and hope. The lilies I leave are always gone by my next visit, replaced by a single white feather, a sign perhaps of Henry's eternal call. I keep his photo on my desk, his smile a reminder that love endures, even in the shadow of the grave. Story 5. The Ghost in the Frame. October's chill was electric, the air alive with the thrill of Halloween 2024. My name is Tyler Brooks, a 17-year-old with a penchant for trouble and a buzz from cheap beer that made the world feel invincible. My friends Ryan and Mike were my accomplices, our nights fueled by teenage bravado and a hunger for the next thrill. One evening, drunk at Ryan's house, I suggested sneaking into Willow Grove Cemetery, a small, eerie plot 10 minutes from home. It was a reckless idea, born of boredom and the spirit of the season. Ryan, the sober one who never touched alcohol, agreed to drive, his eyes gleaming with reluctant curiosity. Willow Grove was a forgotten relic, its weathered headstones huddled behind a low iron fence. The cemetery was small, maybe 2 acres, its inscriptions barely legible under centuries of moss and neglect. It sat on the edge of town, bordered by a quiet road and a dense thicket of pines that seemed to whisper secrets. Locals avoided it, claiming it was haunted by the town's early settlers, their graves unmarked and restless. The night was dark, the sky starless, amplifying the cemetery's eerie allure. Ryan parked in a lot across the street, the town asleep under the weight of midnight. We hopped the fence, our iPhone flashlights piercing the darkness, casting long shadows across the graves. The air was crisp, laced with the scent of pine and earth. We split up, our laughter echoing as we explored, the alcohol dulling our sense of trespass. Mike and Ryan stuck closer together, their flashlights bobbing in the distance, while I wandered deeper, drawn to the oldest stones at the cemetery's heart. I decided to record a video, capturing the tombstone's ghostly outlines for a creepy keepsake. My phone's flashlight illuminated the graves, their epitaphs a litany of forgotten lives. Farmers, midwives, children lost to fever. The video was meant to be a joke, something to show off at school, but as I panned the camera, my screen showed something impossible. A woman in a white gown, her gray hair cascading over her shoulders, standing among the graves, her head bowed as if in prayer. I froze, my breath catching. I looked up, but the spot was empty, the grave silent under my flashlight's beam. Heart pounding, I checked the screen again. She was there, now looking at me, her eyes hollow and unblinking, her face pale as bone. I stumbled back, but she was gone in person, only visible on my phone. My pulse raced as I zoomed in, her features sharpening. Her gown was tattered, its hem stained with dirt, her hands skeletal, clutching something I couldn't see. She moved closer on the screen, her form gliding without legs, a spectral wraith that defied the laws of the world. I screamed for Ryan and Mike, sprinting for the fence, my phone still recording as I ran. They didn't answer, and I feared a prank, their laughter hidden in the dark. The woman's image flickered on my screen, her face growing larger, her eyes boring into mine. I reached the fence, scrambling over it, my hands scraping against the iron. I made it to Ryan's car, texting them to get out, my fingers trembling. They joined me minutes later, their faces pale, their flashlights dim. We piled into the car and I showed them the video. The woman's slow, deliberate approach was undeniable, her movement unnatural, like a shadow sliding across water. She lifted her head, her lips parting in a silent scream, before I'd started running, the video cutting to chaos. We drove away, the video replaying in my mind. At Ryan's house, we watched it again, noticing details I'd missed. Her gown bore faint embroidery, a pattern of roses, and her hands held a locket, its chain broken. The way she moved, with no leg movement, suggested she wasn't bound to the earth. My old iPhone 4S holds that video, but it won't turn on, stuck at the Apple logo. I've tried everything to retrieve it, but the phone resists, as if guarding its secret. Ryan and Mike think she was real, a late-night wanderer caught on camera. But I saw her only through the lens, and that night changed me. I began researching Willow Grove, digging through town records and old newspapers. I found a story from 1847, a woman named Eliza Hawthorne, a widow buried in an unmarked grave after dying in childbirth. Her husband, a preacher, had cursed the town, claiming her spirit would never rest. Locals reported sightings of a woman in white, always near the cemetery's oldest section. I returned once in daylight and found a grave with faint rose carvings, half buried under moss. I felt her presence, a cold breath on my neck, a whisper of my name. The sightings didn't stop. At school, I'd see her in reflections, hear her voice in the wind. My grades slipped. My friends distanced themselves, sensing the change in me. I kept the phone, refusing to reset it, desperate to preserve the video. One night, it powered on briefly, the video playing unprompted. Eliza's face filled the screen, her eyes pleading, her voice a faint whisper. "Find me." The phone died again, and I haven't seen her since. But I feel her in the quiet moments, a ghost in the frame I can't escape. I've started sketching her, the roses, the locket, hoping to uncover her story. Willow Grove holds her secret, and I'm bound to it, a keeper of the ghost who found me. Story 1, The Knock at Midnight. In the rolling hills of Buckingham, Iowa, where amber waves of corn stretch endlessly under a vast, starlit sky, Cheryl and Tom Grayson lived a life carved from the earth itself. Their farm, a sprawling patchwork of fields and weathered barns, was a testament to generations of toil. It was August 2018, and a gentle rain pattered against the windows of their century-old farmhouse, casting a soft, melancholic rhythm over the night. The couple, both in their late 50s, had spent their entire lives tethered to this land, their days dictated by the cycles of planting and harvest. To them, the farm was more than a livelihood. It was a way of being, a quiet sanctuary in a world that seemed to grow louder with each passing year. That night, the Graysons had invited their closest neighbors, George and Ellen Harper, over for a lively evening of board games and bourbon. George, a burly man with a booming laugh, and Ellen, his sharp-witted wife, lived half a mile down the dirt road that cut through the cornfields. In a place where the nearest town was a 20-minute drive and strangers were as rare as a blue moon, neighbors became family. The four laughed and drank late into the night, their voices echoing through the cozy living room until the Harpers stumbled back to their truck around 11 p.m., their headlights slicing through the misty darkness as they made the short drive home. Cheryl and Tom, now alone, settled onto their worn leather couch, a bottle of Merlot between them as they queued up The Quiet Man, a favorite film that never failed to stir their hearts. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the house creaked softly under the weight of the night. They were halfway through the movie, their eyelids heavy with wine and warmth, when a sharp, deliberate knock rattled the front door. The sound was so jarring, so utterly out of place in the stillness of their remote home, that Tom nearly spilled his glass. Cheryl froze, her hand gripping his arm. "Who the hell's knocking at this hour?" Tom muttered, his voice low but edged with unease. In all their years on the farm, a late-night visitor was unheard of. The closest they'd ever come was George dropping by to borrow a wrench, and even that was at dusk, never past midnight. The knock came again, harder this time, accompanied by a faint, muffled voice that seemed to plead through the thick oak door. "Help! We need help!" Tom stood, his instincts torn between hospitality and caution. Cheryl's eyes widened, her face pale in the flickering light of the television. "Don't," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Something's not right." But Tom, ever the protector, crept toward the door, his bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. He leaned close, his ear nearly brushing the wood, and called out, "Who's there?" A voice answered, male but oddly strained, as if forcing a higher pitch. "Oh, thank God. Please, we're lost. Can you open the door?" The words were polite, but there was something unnatural in their cadence, a rehearsed quality that sent a shiver down Tom's spine. He glanced back at Cheryl, who shook her head vehemently, her lips forming a silent no. "Who's we?" Tom pressed, his hand hovering over the deadbolt. The voice hesitated, then replied, "Me and my wife." Tom's eyes narrowed. "Then let me hear her," he said, his tone firm. Silence followed, thick and oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the television. After a long moment, the voice returned, now tinged with irritation. "She's not right here. She's by the car." Cheryl's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Tom's mind raced. The nearest road was a quarter-mile away, and no car lights had pierced the darkness outside. He forced a laugh, trying to diffuse the tension. "George, you drunk old fool, is that you?" George was notorious for his pranks, and Tom clung to the hope that this was just another of his neighbor's antics. But the voice responded with a single, chilling word. "Yeah." It was deeper now, unmistakably not George's, and it carried a mocking undertone that made Tom's blood run cold. He stepped back from the door, his heart pounding. Cheryl was already dialing 911, her fingers shaking as she whispered their address to the dispatcher. Tom grabbed his phone and called George, praying his friend would confirm the prank. The line rang 3 times before George's groggy voice answered. "Tom, what's wrong?" When Tom asked if he was at their door, George's confusion was palpable. "No, man, I'm in bed. What's going on?" Tom's voice dropped to a hiss. "Someone's here, George. They're pretending to be you. Get over here, quick." George promised to come, and Tom hung up, his eyes locked on the door. The knocks came again, more insistent, followed by the same voice, now pleading with a false sincerity. "We just need a phone. Please, we're not going to hurt you." Tom's temper flared. "I've got a shotgun, and I'll use it if you don't get off my property," he bellowed, though the gun was still upstairs in the closet. Then they heard it, footsteps, heavy and deliberate, circling the house on the wooden deck that wrapped around the first floor. Not one set, but 2, maybe 3, moving with a slow, predatory rhythm. Cheryl stifled a sob, still on the phone with the dispatcher, who promised an officer but warned it could take 30 minutes in their remote corner of the county. The footsteps stopped outside the living room window, and a faint scratching sound followed, as if someone were testing the latch. Cheryl screamed, "Leave us alone!" And Tom roared, "I'll blow your damn head off!" His bravado masked the terror clawing at his chest. He sprinted upstairs, retrieving the shotgun from the closet and loading it with trembling hands. As he descended, the front door shuddered under a barrage of pounding, but this time a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Tom, it's George! Open up!" Tom hesitated, his mind still reeling from the imposter's trick, but he recognized George's distinctive drawl. He flung the door open to find his neighbor, shotgun in hand, his face flushed from the sprint across the fields. "I didn't see nobody," George panted, stepping inside, "but I heard something out there, rustling in the corn." The three waited, guns at the ready, until the distant wail of sirens announced the sheriff's arrival. Deputy Hargrove, a grizzled veteran, searched the property with them, his flashlight cutting through the misty night. They found nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks, no trace of the intruders. "Could have been kids messing around," Hargrove suggested, but his tone lacked conviction. He advised installing security cameras, a precaution the Graysons had never considered in their quiet corner of the world. That night, as Tom and Cheryl lay awake, the memory of those footsteps haunted them. The wooden door, once a symbol of their home's warmth, now felt like a flimsy barrier against the unknown. They installed cameras the following week, their lenses trained on the darkness that had once felt so safe. But the question lingered, gnawing at their peace. Who or what had stood on their porch that night, and what did they truly want? Story 2. The Ritual in the Corn. The summer of 2018 was swelteringly unbearable in rural Iowa, where the air hung heavy with the scent of earth and maize. For 19-year-old Jake Larson, the season meant a temporary escape from college to the sprawling farm owned by his grandparents, Ed and Martha. The Larson farm, nestled in a forgotten corner of the state, was a place of endless chores and quiet nights, its fields stretching like a green ocean under the relentless sun. Jake had agreed to watch the property for a weekend while his grandparents visited relatives in Des Moines, a gig that promised a few $100 and a chance to reconnect with the land he'd once loved as a child. On his final night, Jake sprawled across the living room couch, the glow of an old Western flickering on the ancient tube TV. The farmhouse, with its creaking floors and faded wallpaper, felt like a time capsule, each corner steeped in memories of summers past. Outside, the cornfields whispered under a gentle breeze, their stalks swaying like silent sentinels. Jake was half asleep, lulled by the drone of the movie, when a strange sound pierced the quiet, a low, rhythmic rustling from the cornfield beyond the barn. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and muted the TV. The sound came again, sharper now, like footsteps crunching through the dry husks. "Probably a damn deer," he muttered, trying to shake off the unease creeping up his spine. Deer were common enough, wandering from the nearby woods to nibble at the crops. But then the cows in the barn began to moo, not the lazy, solitary calls Jake was used to, but a frantic, unified chorus that sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. Every cow in the herd was crying out, their voices rising into a cacophony of fear. Jake's heart thudded as he grabbed a flashlight and pulled on his boots. He hesitated at the door, the weight of his solitude pressing down on him. The farm was miles from the nearest neighbor, and his grandparents' ancient rotary phone was his only lifeline to the outside world. Steeling himself, he stepped onto the porch, the cool night air biting at his skin. The mooing grew louder, more desperate, and then a new sound cut through the din, a high-pitched, almost human scream from one of the cows. It was a sound Jake had never heard, a primal wail that froze him in place. He sprinted to the barn, the flashlight beam dancing wildly across the gravel path. Inside, the cows were in chaos, their eyes wide with panic as they strained against their ropes. Jake swept the light across the stalls, counting heads, his breath hitching when he realized one was missing. Daisy, a gentle Holstein, was gone, her stall empty save for a frayed rope dangling from the post. "No way," Jake whispered, his mind racing. He checked the knots himself that afternoon. Someone or something had untied her. The mooing continued, now coming from the cornfield, high and pained. Jake's pulse pounded in his ears as he grabbed his grandfather's hunting rifle from the house, its weight both comforting and terrifying. He loaded it with shaking hands and stepped back into the night, the cornfield looming like a dark, impenetrable wall. As he approached, he swore he heard voices, low, guttural murmurs weaving through the stalks, too indistinct to make out, but unmistakably human. Fear clawed at him, but duty drove him forward. He fired 2 rounds into the sky, the cracks echoing like thunder. The cows fell silent, and the voices stopped, leaving only the rustle of the corn. Jake stood frozen, the rifle heavy in his hands when he heard it. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving through the field. They weren't fleeing, but circling, closing in. His mouth went dry as he backed toward the barn, his flashlight catching glints of movement in the shadows. Then he saw it, a figure, cloaked in black, standing motionless at the edge of the corn. Its face was hidden behind a crude mask, its eyes hollow pits that seemed to drink in the light. Jake raised the rifle, his voice cracking as he shouted, "Get out of here now!" The figure didn't move. He fired another shot into the air, expecting it to bolt, but it remained unnervingly still. Then slowly it began to walk toward him, its arms raised slightly as if in mockery of surrender. Jake's courage faltered as more figures emerged from the corn, their masked faces gleaming in the moonlight. There were at least 7, maybe more, their movements synchronized like a pack of wolves. He stumbled backward, his screams lost in the night, when they began to chant, a low melodic drone in a language he couldn't place, its cadence both beautiful and terrifying. The air grew thick, charged with an unnatural energy, and Jake's mind screamed with the certainty that he was about to become part of some unspeakable ritual. He turned and ran, the corn slashing at his arms as he tore through the rows. When he could run no more, he spun and fired 6 rounds blindly into the darkness, the recoil jarring his shoulder. The chanting stopped, replaced by the sound of footsteps retreating, the stalks rustling as the figures fled. Gasping for breath, Jake stumbled back toward the farmhouse, his flashlight beam sweeping the ground. That's when he saw it, a cow's head, Daisy's head, severed cleanly and placed at the center of a circle of flickering candles. The sight was so grotesque, so wrong, that Jake fell to his knees, vomiting into the dirt. He staggered into the house, locking every door and window before collapsing with the phone. The 911 operator's calm voice was a lifeline as he recounted the nightmare, her promise of an officer's arrival barely registering. He called his parents next, his voice breaking as he begged them to come get him. For an hour he sat in his grandfather's room, the rifle across his lap, every creak of the house sending his heart into his throat. When the police arrived, Officer Daniels searched the property, his flashlight revealing the cow's head and the candles, now extinguished. He called for a forensic team, declaring the farm an active crime scene. Jake's parents arrived soon after, their faces pale as they listened to his story. The Larsons installed a state-of-the-art security system the following week, but Jake never returned to the farm. The memory of those masked figures, their chants echoing in the night, haunted him. A reminder that some evils lurk not in the cities, but in the quiet, forgotten places where the corn grows tall. Story 3. The Whistler in the Dark. Howard Mason was 25, a lanky young man with dreams too big for the small family farm he called home in rural Arkansas. Tucked away in a sleepy corner of the state, the Mason farm was a modest operation, its fields of soybeans and wheat surrounded by dense woods and rolling hills. Howard's parents, Carl and Linda, had poured their lives into the land, hoping their only son would one day take the reins. But Howard's heart wasn't in it. He longed for the pulse of the city, for a life beyond the endless cycle of planting and pruning. The events of July 2024 only solidified his resolve to leave. His parents were away on a rare anniversary trip, leaving Howard and his younger sisters, Crystal and Morgan, to mind the farm. Crystal, 22, was buried in her online college courses, her bedroom a fortress of textbooks and laptop glow. Morgan, 19, was content to lounge with Howard in the living room, their laughter mingling with the canned dialogue of a cheesy reality show. The farmhouse, with its peeling paint and sagging porch, was a haven of familiarity, its isolation both a comfort and a curse. The nearest neighbor was a mile away, and the only sounds at night were the chirping of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. As midnight approached, the siblings were winding down, the house settling into its usual nighttime groans. Crystal was still typing away upstairs, while Howard and Morgan debated whether to watch another episode. Then from the backyard, their 2 dogs, Rusty and Belle, erupted into a frenzy of barking, their snarls cutting through the quiet like a knife. Howard frowned, setting down his soda. "What's got them so riled up?" he muttered, heading to the back door. He stepped onto the porch, the cool night air heavy with the scent of earth. The dogs were straining at their chains, their eyes fixed on the cornfield that bordered the yard. Howard followed their gaze, his ears straining for any sound. Then he heard it, a low, deliberate whistle, unmistakably human, drifting from the depths of the corn. It was a slow, haunting melody, the kind that might linger in a nightmare. Howard's skin prickled as he yelled at the dogs to quiet down, his voice sharper than intended. They obeyed, but their hackles remained raised, their growls low and menacing. He hurried inside, his mind racing. Trespassers weren't common, but they weren't unheard of, thieves looking to steal crops or equipment. The family kept a small arsenal for just such occasions, and Howard grabbed a shotgun from the hall closet, its weight grounding him. He told his sisters about the whistling, expecting them to brush it off, but their faces paled. "You're not going out there, are you?" Morgan asked, her voice small. Crystal, peering over the banister, shook her head. "That's a dumb idea, Howard. Call Dad." He hesitated, their fear feeding his own. Chasing a stranger into a dark cornfield suddenly seemed less heroic than suicidal. Instead, he returned to the backyard, the dogs still tense, and fired a warning shot into the sky. The blast echoed, silencing the night, and Howard bellowed, "Get off our land!" His voice carried a bravado he didn't feel, but he hoped it was enough. He retreated inside, where his sisters greeted him with nervous laughter, the tension breaking for a moment. But the reprieve was short-lived. The dogs started barking again, louder and more frantic. Howard grabbed the shotgun and stepped outside, his heart pounding. That's when he saw him, a man tall and lean, standing just beyond the dogs, his silhouette stark against the corn. He wore a dark jacket, his face obscured by shadow, and he was whistling that same eerie tune. "Hey!" Howard shouted, his voice cracking. The man turned, his eyes glinting in the moonlight, and then bolted into the cornfield, the stalks swallowing him whole. Howard sprinted after him, stopping at the edge of the field to fire another shot into the air. He wasn't about to plunge into the darkness, not with the dogs still barking and his sisters alone in the house. He unchained Rusty and Belle, bringing them inside for safety, their warmth a small comfort. He lay in bed, the window cracked open to let in the night air, a movie playing softly on his laptop. The whistling returned, faint at first, then growing louder, closer. Howard's blood ran cold as he crept to the window, peering into the darkness. There, on the lawn below, was the man, strolling casually, his whistle now a taunting serenade. He stopped as if sensing Howard's gaze, and turned to look directly at the window, his face still hidden, but his intent clear. He was toying with them, reveling in their fear. Rage overtook Howard's terror. He grabbed the shotgun, leaned out the window, and fired a shot into the grass a few feet from the man, the blast illuminating the night. The whistling stopped, and the man sprinted toward the front of the house, his footsteps fading into silence. Howard waited, his breath ragged, but the intruder didn't return. He told his sisters what happened, assuring them the danger had passed, though he wasn't entirely convinced himself. The next morning, they found no trace of the man, no footprints, no broken stalks, nothing to suggest he'd ever been there. Howard's parents returned early, shaken by the story but relieved their children were safe. They installed motion sensor lights and cameras, but Howard's mind was made up. The farm, once a place of comfort, now felt like a trap, its isolation a magnet for things that thrived in the dark. He began planning his escape, determined to leave the whistling man and the farm behind forever.